Gerry Adams, first of all, thank you for coming into studio. Over the decades, the last 2 decades certainly, and more, we have sat in television studios together, and I've often spoken about your role in the peace process and that critically important role. But tonight we're focusing on that apology in the Dáil and the victims' families of Republican violence. Those killings there, reported on in Barry's report, they were murders, weren't they?
Well, by definition, any killing of another human being by another human being is a murder, of course, and I have condemned the killing of Gardaí, of the Defence Force members who were killed, and others. I don't have any hesitation about that. I was very taken by the video. I was very taken by what the victims' families said, and clearly some of them remain traumatised, understandably, to this day. And the last man to speak, Mr. Donegan, I think, described very, very clearly what members of families who I have met, and I've met many, many victims' families over a very, very long time. In fact, my own family had 2 family members killed, and many of my neighbours killed in the course or as a consequence of the conflict. So the point behind trying to deal with these issues is to try and bring those families to a better place in the place.
Okay, let me come back in there if that's okay. You mentioned there Michael Donegan, and obviously it's 41 years since his father, Sam, was killed by the IRA. They're looking for acknowledgement by the IRA that in fact their father was a victim of the IRA and an apology. Can you give that to the Donegan family now tonight?
Well, first of all, let's remember that the IRA have left the stage.
No, that's not what I asked.
No,
I
know it isn't what you asked, but you asked me for the IRA to acknowledge, could I get the IRA to acknowledge that they had killed Mr. Donegan, Garda Donegan. So I'm making the point. I don't know who killed Garda Donegan. It may have been Republicans, it may have been the IRA.
Well, the Historical Inquiries team, just to come back in there, have categorically said they believe it was the IRA, Gerry Adams.
Okay, but just, if you don't mind, Marion, let me just articulate a position. The IRA called the cessation almost 20 years ago. Now, it broke down shortly afterwards, but it left the stage almost 10 years ago. It famously put its arms beyond use. It stood down its structures. So if we want to find out, did the IRA kill this guard officer, or indeed prison officer Stack or the other guard officer, then we need to find some way of getting to the truth. That's what we need to do. And I think we've had 2 good examples recently of how that has been achieved. One was the Savile inquiry in Derry, which was put together in such a way as...
We know that. And what's the second one?
And the second one is the Smithwick's inquiry.
Fine.
Which is investigating the killing of 2 RUC officers.
But tonight, as I said at the beginning, Gerry Adams, to be fair, tonight we are discussing the victims of Republican violence. You were a senior leader within the Republican movement. These 3 families, the Donegans, the Stacks, let's take the case of Brian Stack, the prison officer, right? You heard his 2 sons there. They are looking for acknowledgement that the IRA shot their father in the back of the neck and an apology. Can you give that to them tonight?
Well, if the IRA killed any of these, or even if Republicans acting independently killed any of those people, of course I apologise for that, because I do recognise as a Republican leader I have a responsibility to try and keep moving this process on this island to a point where those who suffered as a consequence of the conflict can get closure. But let me just
Wait, one second. But you see, can I just say, but they're fine words. But I'm saying to you, can you, all these years on, apologise? Because you almost sit there, like you knew nothing about anything that happened within the Republican family, and nobody really believes that. Can you give them an acknowledgement?
First of all, I would like you to be fair. Yeah. I know nothing about the killing of these 3 individuals. One of these killings happened 43 years ago. So let's be very, very clear. Let's look at the killing of Mr. Stack. Now, I'm meeting with his family, and I explained to his family in a letter to them that I mightn't be able to give them the answers. They're asking Sinn Féin, please let me finish, Miriam.
Yeah,
they're asking Sinn Féin to acknowledge this man's killing. At that time in that prison, there were INLA prisoners, there were Republican prisoners. It was a very, very cruel regime. One Republican prisoner was killed during that period.
Let me come back in there for one moment.
No, sir, just please let me finish. Any individual Republican, or indeed criminals are also criminal, ordinary, decent prisoners.
Fine.
There were also a plethora in the last 40 years of Republican organisations. The official IRA was active in this state in killings. The INLA was active in this state.
Okay, let me come back in there.
Sierra was active in this state.
I need to come back in there, to be fair, Gerry Adams. Two Sinn Féin colleagues of yours, Martin Ferris and Desi Ellis, were in Portlaoise when Brian Stack was there. So they would have some knowledge, and you're still colleagues and friends of theirs. And in his own autobiography, Martin Ferris spoke about Brian Stack being a very vindictive individual, which almost to the Stack family looked like he was in some way trying to justify his murder. Like, there's no way you couldn't have heard of Brian Stack's murder.
Of course I heard about his mother, but you're asking me, do I know who killed him? That's an entirely different...
Did the IRA kill him?
I don't know.
Do you really not know?
No, I don't really know. And if I did, I would say to you, I'm not about, at this time in my life, and having come what I have come through, about standing here and setting pat answers back. I want to genuinely bring, if it's possible. Now, you know, the Good Friday Agreement is 15 years old this month, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Good Friday Agreement, and your friend John Hume and lots of us worked at that.
Yeah.
And a very, very crucial part of that Good Friday Agreement was that it dealt with the issue of prisoners. And a huge amount of...
What's that got to do with what we're talking about, with the greatest respect?
Well, if you let me finish my point, then you might know. But if you keep interrupting me, nobody will know. Because a mark of our interviews over that number of decades has been perpetual interruptions when I'm trying to elaborate on a point. So, prisoners were released. Prisoners in both jurisdictions were released. Both governments agreed on that. And the people voted for it. A lot of those prisoners, because what had been developed was a democratic, peaceful way to achieve political objectives. So the rationale, the reason for any armed or violent actions was totally and absolutely removed. Now, at this time, we have a peaceful and democratic way to go forward, and we have a huge legacy of history.
Which is what I'm asking you about tonight.
Which I want to be part of, if I can, in my limited way, to be part of moving into a different space.
Which is great for the families to hear that.
Well, so I will meet, if they want me, and they might want to meet with me, but if the families want to meet with me, I will
Okay, well, we know
meet with
Brian
them.
Stack's family. No, actually, Gerry, you see, I need to come back in there. Part of our history as well is you never let me back in to ask a question. In relation to Brian Stack, his family have written, and they do want to meet you. But you said they're even just talking to me there about the cruel regime in Portlaoise, which almost sounds, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but it almost sounds like you'd be justifying the killing of Brian Stack.
I'm not justifying. I don't want to need to justify anybody's killing. Let me tell you something, Miriam. Tom Smith was killed in Portlaoise, a Republican prisoner. Hugh Herr was killed in County Clare. Eddie Fullerton, a colleague and close friend of mine, was killed in Buncrana. John Francis Green was killed. People were killed in Dublin and in Monaghan. The heavy gang assaulted. Innocents went to prison. Now, let me just make another point.
On that point, I made it at the beginning. I don't deny that. I was here discussing the hunger strikers the other night and saying how sorry we felt for their families.
Mariam.
But tonight I'm discussing something different.
Well, but you can't put words into my mouth. Let me give you another little example that you might find interesting. After the Town War and after the Civil War, please let me finish. There was no peace and reconciliation process even attempted. The shape of politics decided in the state was moulded by that. Now, here we are, a very short time after a war has ended, trying to deal with this very, very
Okay, well, let me go back to your Dáil
issue.
apology. You did apologise. First of all, who were you apologising on behalf of?
Well, as I made it clear at the time, on behalf of Sinn Féin, on behalf of Republicans. And I had previously, this was portrayed as my first apology, I had previously on 2 occasions in the matter of public record apologised for the killing of Gerry
Okay,
McHugh.
but who were you apologising to? For instance, those 3 families tonight, Gerry Adams, they're members of the state forces. Were you apologising to those 3 families?
Anyone who was killed as part of the state forces by the IRA or by Republicans is a matter of deep, deep regret for me. Now, any death, and all of us as human beings are shocked and outraged or annoyed or saddened by deaths. But in my case, as someone who defended the IRA during the war as someone who remains a very, very strong Republican and so on and so forth. It's even worse if that organisation was about accidentally or deliberately.
Okay, let me come back in there,
people.
to be fair, Gerry Adams. More or less, when I asked you were those killings murders, you said yes. Were any of those 3 murders we spoke about there justified?
No.
Fine. In relation to another infamous murder, that of Tom Oliver in Louth, you know that case, do you?
I do, yes, yes.
In Cooley, he was taken by the IRA, murdered horrendously. In fact, the local priest said it looked like concrete blocks had been dropped on every bone of his body.
Of course, that's to be condemned. If that's the case, that's to be condemned. Of course it is. I mean, I was actually in, by complete fluke, I was in holidays down in Galway and came back up and was in the Coolies at the time that Tom Oliver was killed. I was with my family in the Coolies at that time.
There is a strong belief, though, that in fact you were the Court of Appeal that said Tom Oliver should go to his death.
How can there is a strong belief. How can you come on this programme and say that, Miriam? Now, you're a journalist. How can you come on that programme and say that?
Because in the same way, I suppose, that Garda commissioners, PSNI constables,
you're making the most...
But you can deny it.
Excuse me, but you should not be. You would not have the leader of the Labour Party, who was a very, very prominent member of the Workers' Party at the time, for example, when Seamus Costello. You wouldn't have Pat Robert in here and put that accusation to him.
But I'm entitled to put it to you by Tom.
You're not entitled to put it to me.
Well, you can deny it.
Well, I clearly deny it, but I do think that it's a very, very reprehensible accusation to make. I'm on this programme trying to make sense out of what was a conflict which marked this entire island and also very grievously the number of thousands of people who were killed.
But I'm speaking to you about the actions of Republicans, and you're here as a leader of the Republicans, so I have to put those questions to you.
That's a different thing from accusing me of saying, what are your source?
In relation to
No, sorry, Miriam, you cannot just come on a programme and say it is widely believed or it is believed that you were in a court of appeal.
Widely believed by members of his family?
Miriam.
Yes, that is the case, Gerry. Right. Let's move to the disappeared, actually. Jean McConville, as you know, was the infamous case in 1972. 2 former colleagues of yours, including Brendan Hughes, who did say at one stage, Gerry, that he loved you, he felt so close to you. There are those great photos of you together in the maze, giving each other hugs. Both he and Dolores Price both said that you were responsible for Jean McConville's disappearance.
I've answered this accusation many times. Many times. They were telling lies.
Why would they lie?
Because they are people who, as they went on in their lives, became opponents, thought that I sold out, thought that I was a traitor, thought that I should be killed, are totally opposed to the peace process and allied themselves with various so-called dissident groups. Now, let me, if I may, first of all, none of those people who were killed and disappeared by the IRA, that should not have happened.
But why would Dolores Price have said it? Why would Dolores Price have said it, though?
Well, I've already told you why I think she would say it. But let me deal with this as an issue of trying to resolve a great injustice done. I went and talked to Father Alex Reid. And Father Alex Reid went and tried to put together a process of discovering these bodies. And he looked at the way, because the IRA had investigated and did an inquiry and named the number of people that it had killed and said that would try and help to recover their bodies. Now, Father Alex came back and he said to me, Gerry, this has been done wrong. This needs to be put together as if it was a cold case. This needs to be put together forensically. We need to bring in people who know about archaeology. We need to bring in... And we put together, the 2 of us, a plan which then went to the Irish government and the British government.
Okay.
And the commission was put forward. And the commission has recovered.
Okay, and I accept that.
And bear with me now, just. And a man called Nuffler, who is the chief forensics investigating person in all of this, said he got the fullest cooperation from IRA volunteers. The fullest cooperation. He said, I think I'm quoting him properly, that he got 100% cooperation. Now, here is a great injustice.
So you keep talking now, filibustering. And in fact, I need to come back. I do need to come back in.
The point is, Republicans did something wrong. And the Republicans could not have repaired that wrong, but they tried to give back to the family what the families deserved.
But, like, according to Jolas Price Brennan Hughes, you were the commanding officer in Belfast in 1972. Are there any murders that you feel responsible for?
No. I clearly, as a Republican leader, will think back over all of the period that words of mine, that actions of mine, that stances that I took, and I don't distance myself from the IRA. I've never distanced myself from the IRA, and until the day I die, I will not distance myself from the IRA.
Well, by saying you were never in it, of course, it does distance you from it.
But bear with me now, Miriam. See, the war is over. The war is over.
But for those families that Barry Cummins spoke to, Gerry, it's not over for those families.
I understand that, but if those families feel in some way that I can help, I will meet with them. And maybe at the end of it, I won't be able to help, but I'm prepared to try to do it. Now, what Sinn Féin have been arguing for, and tell me, Miriam, who you know so much about these issues, why the two governments won't set up an arrangement whereby we invite in, under the aegis of an international agency, a truly independent international process to look at all of these matters. Why don't the governments do that? The smart remark from the Taoiseach came in response to a question from me, which was about children's benefit or some such issue. That's what that was about. I mean, how much investment has the Taoiseach in these matters?
Okay, can I just come back on that? I suppose for those three families that Barry Cummins spoke to, Gerry Adams, maybe they worry that I've sat here tonight, and with respect, you do act like you know absolutely nothing about even the murder of Brian Stack, and maybe that will worry them, that even if they meet you, or even if there was a peace and reconciliation forum, that the truth ultimately would not be told.
Well, those who were involved, and clearly someone killed these citizens, put together a process. It happened in Savile, it happened with Smithick, where in an unprecedented way, IRA, former IRA volunteers who were involved in operations in the South Armagh area came forward and give evidence. Now, maybe the families won't get. I know, many families who will go to the grave without getting the type of closure that is required. An old,
but you could help them.
Well, that's why am I on this programme? I mean, this isn't the most popular issue to be talking about on prime time.
But it matters a lot to them, and you apologise. So many people feel it does matter for Sinn Féin. Ultimately, if they wish to be in the government down here, that they actually do need to put some closure for the families that.
Well, again, if you don't mind me saying so, look at the shape of the current government and then ask the question about Seamus Costello, ask the question about Larry White, and I am not here as a person who is concerned about the fortunes of Sinn Féin. I'm here because I think I have a moral duty to try, as someone who went through the conflict, was lucky enough to survive, who was shot myself, by the way, and I tried to be killed a number of times. I want to be part of trying to sort all of this out, and never again will any person on the island of Ireland be bereaved as a result of political violence.
Fair enough. You are currently the leader of Sinn Féin, but you were also, according to many people, the commanding officer in West Belfast. It was a bloody conflict on both sides. People suffered on both sides. What are you honestly saying to me tonight, that there's no murder whatsoever, no death, no killing, that you feel in any way responsible for?
Well, I've already answered that question. I'm not going to keep repeating my answer.
But you were in the IRA.
Well, I've already answered that one many times. Now, let's look back at the history of the conflict. We probably don't have the time, and you would, of course, interrupt me. But, I mean, look at all the people who politically turned their back on the North. Look at successive Dublin governments. Look at the role of British governments.
All of that.
I accept full responsibility for anything that I did in all of my political life.
You're not denying your role in the IRA tonight?
I have already denied my role in the IRA. I don't want to keep repeating. But one of the issues you said earlier on was that you talked to me many times about, I think you said about the Dáil. You mostly only bring me on this programme to talk to me about the war, Miriam. The war is over.
That's actually untrue. We talk about the peace process a lot, Gerry Adams.
The war is over.
Except for those people
who are victims
and that's why
I'm here.
Families.
And that's why I agreed to come on this programme. And that's why I have agreed, if the families want, to meet with them. And also, and most importantly, why Sinn Féin has invested so much time because we live in communities which have suffered grievously. The video that you saw, that we both saw there, which is heartbreaking, could be repeated ad infinitum. I could take you through any street in West Belfast and we could make a similar video. So all of those people deserve truth. And if I can help to bring truth, but I can't do it on terms which are not realistically based on what I know about these issues.
Let me ask you another. What about the forgotten people? I mentioned Tom Oliver, but even Eamon Collins, who actually sat in a primetime studio with me a few weeks before he was murdered by the IRA. Do you ever worry about people like that, or feel and think about them? Or are they justifiable victims of the war?
Well, first of all, I mean, what happens in war is dreadful. And you've heard me say this a million times, that we should not seek to glamorise war. War is horrific. Now, on the killing of Eamon...
Was that murder? Was it murder? Was Eamon Collins a murder?
And by definition, the killing of any human being by another human being is murder. Of course it is. But you see, these actions could be carried out by individuals.
But it's not all... Killings aren't always murder, to be honest. Like, I used to be a lawyer. Killings aren't always murder. What I'm saying is, I suppose the killing of Tom Oliver and Eamon Collins, informers as they were regarded, is that murder?
Well, I've already answered that question, I think. And, you know, will we get out our thesaurus? Will we go through all of this? Because what war does, it legitimises murder. That's what war does. And people support one side or the other side in whatever they happen to do. Now, you see, the big achievement of perhaps the last century and perhaps this century has been a peace process. And that peace process is probably the most successful peace process, but it's not perfect. And of course, there are all of these legacy issues. I can't get the government here to address these legacy issues. I want the government to address these legacy issues. I can't get the British government to address these legacy issues. Martin McGuinness is pressing the issue because we come from communities, and also because we are responsible political leaders, that we appreciate that those who were killed by the side we supported are deserving of our help.
As leader of Sinn Féin, you've been leader since Gareth Fitzgerald was Taoiseach. I mean, do you accept that for Sinn Féin, perhaps to get into government here, Gerry Adams, you will have to cease being leader?
Well, the first thing we need, Miriam, with respect, is a mandate. The second thing we need is a programme for government. Whether I'm the leader or not is very second to all of that. And please, if you don't mind me saying so, we're in government in the north, and we have a lot of catching up to do in this state with what's going on in the north, because people who were fierce opponents and all of these unanswered questions, still yet resolved, have agreed to come together to work for the good of people.
So if any of those three families tonight, Barry Cummins-Phil, want to meet you, you will meet them.
Let me finish. Don't please say something which somebody on the fringes of government will then use as a precondition. Sinn Féin has a mandate. That mandate was denied for decades, both in Section 31 terms and in other terms. Sinn Féin members and councillors were killed in the course of the conflict. So please respect those people. And if people give us a vote, and if we have a programme for government, we will be in government, not on any other basis, but that we deserve to be so because we have a mandate.
And we've got to find those three families speaking to Barry Cummins. I feel a responsibility. They've spoken to us. If any of those wish to speak to you,
I've already made that clear. Don't feel responsible, Miriam, please. I've already said very, very clearly in my RTE speech, if you've been listening, that I was prepared to meet any families who wanted to meet with me.
Gerry Adams, thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Thanks, Miriam.
And that is it for tonight. Thanks very much from everyone here. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night.